going on, everyone? K-Dub here with another episode of Crypto Zombie. Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing all right today. Now, I decided to make today's video. This is going to be a quick video, but I wanted to make an update because we obviously have seen some interesting price action for Bitcoin, right? We got all the way up to around 123, and then we did in fact dip as August comes in, right? Everything was looking great, and then we had Bitcoin fall down to around $112,000. Now, this also happened to coincide, by the way, with a massive move for the stock market as well, right? For example, the S&P, you could see, was in this sort of ascending channel. We were up above it for a while. We had this major dip. That was actually when Bitcoin took its dip as well. Unfortunately, these markets are still, well, somewhat correlated. And right here you see it was getting rejected off of the top of this line, which sort of was acting as that support. Now, the interesting thing to also note, coinciding with the stock market Bitcoin sort of correlation, is the fact that if we just look at it historically, Bitcoin tends to not really perform that well in August. In fact, if you come down here, the median for August is around negative 7.5%, which would actually put August historically as the worst month for Bitcoin, right? But when you really think about it, if you look at the percentages that it does draw down, ultimately, it doesn't represent the largest of the losses, right? We actually have seen much larger down months in months like January, July, and December, which is interesting because July happened to be a good month this year. So just kind of keep that in mind, that historically this time for Bitcoin tends to be a little rough. In fact, if you look even just at Q3 as a whole, you'll notice that the median is about 0.96%. Right? Where you have the average at around 6. Now let's compare that to Q1, 2, or 4, Q1 51, Q2 27, Q4 85, 6% roughly. So again, this could just be a little bit of that cool off period time for Bitcoin, but is there something we should be a little bit more concerned about? Well, ultimately, if we have a look at Bitcoin, we are still sort of respecting this upwards trend, right? And this downwards trend as well. And right now, we're just sort of hanging out in the middle. We're kind of in no man's land right now, right? Now, there are a few things that could obviously signal to us that we might possibly want to start worrying. I'll just show you, for example, what I'm looking at. If we actually hop over here on the FEMX chart, which I've cleaned this up, by the way, made it very easy to look at, we pretty much had this nice upwards trend support. Now, we only have 2 touches so far, but you can argue that we pretty much put in our 3rd touch right here. Generally speaking, if you have 3 touches, that is a confirmed trend, right? The other thing that we have to look at is this resistance that was hanging out around this $111,000 area. Now, if you look at where we're coinciding with that, we're pretty much having a bounce right on that area. So you have essentially 2 levels of support right here. If we were to break below that, that could signal possibly more downwards, sideways price action. But is it something we should be alarmed at? Well, I wouldn't really say in this area because, you know, this is sort of a zone between 109 and 111. Obviously, 111 was the peak here, but we were also bouncing around in this area a lot. So, yes, that would technically break the trend, but we would still be sitting above 109. Now, the worst thing that you'd want to see is to have Bitcoin come all the way down to this sort of 98 area, because this was our other support that we had, and it was actually acting as our resistance back here in April, May. And if we were to have sort of a bounce and then start to move down, well, then we'd obviously have a lot more to be concerned about. However, this move should not surprise you. We've actually spoken about why this was probably going to happen. We'll dive into all that in just a bit. Like I said, today's going to be a little bit of a quicker video, more TA related than news. Not a lot going on in news outside of just, you know, uncertainty around tariffs. Obviously, the Fed still isn't lowering the rates, so that's affecting maybe a little bit of the stocks, but they are now factoring in a much higher percentage chance of a rate cut, which we know that generally speaking, when that does happen, it usually is pretty good for risk on assets, which, you know, Bitcoin is still being lumped into that category. Unfortunately, I do believe it is maturing beyond that, but for right now, it is what it is, right? So that being said, guys, before we do jump into this, I just want to let you know, by the way, if you do want to trade over on FEMX, they are a no KYC exchange. They've been around for a very long time, super credible. I do have a link for massive bonuses below if you guys are interested. I think they're still doing their $30,000 deposit bonus if you want to check that out below. And I just wanted to let you guys know, heads up, that Meta signals, and, you know, I can't really say too much about this, but I want to just give you a heads up that eventually these NFTs are going to be burned. So if you want that lifetime lifetime access to the NFTs, to all of these indicators. You can get the free ones in the Discord. That is going to be going away soon. And that will be it for the NFTs. Once they're burned, once they're gone, that's it. It's not happening yet. Just giving you a heads up. After that, it's gonna, like I said, I can't give too much away, but basically they will not be offering lifetime access. So if you want to get those NFTs, you can still get them below. So, I don't want to go into the charts too much. I want to show you guys what I'm looking at, but really not much has changed. Ultimately, do I believe that this is the top? No, because again, if we just tie in all of these historical indicators, you tie in the pi cycle, the R-HODL ratio, PUL, 2-year moving average, Bitcoin troll, whatever, all these different things, you'll see that we're not really even in the overheated. We've attempted multiple times, but in every other ultimate bull market, we have way gone above and beyond this price into the heated zone. And you can see right here, we've tried to go up there, but we've never quite broken through. So I still think there's a lot that is telling us that there is more room for this rally to grow. Now you see July, for example, has become the most profitable month for Bitcoin miners since the April halving. And also, whales, believe it or not, are continuing to add to their position. Now, you could zoom in here and be like, okay, there was a little bit of whale selling, but ultimately, I think you could see that this has been a collective uptrend in the way that we have seen, in previous bull markets, right? And, you've seen these crazy, look at this, you have this crazy parabolic move, you have this crazy parabolic move, and, is this a parabola? Yes, it is, but it's a very weak parabola at that. Really, there is so much more potential for the quote-unquote banana zone for Bitcoin, right? And even just having a look right here, actually, here's a great example from AO with these parabolas that you start to see with Bitcoin. And, yeah, it is one. It's quite a weak one. But generally speaking, if this is what you are looking at, then according to history and according to just textbook parabolas, you should have at least one more push, right? So that could be suggesting that maybe we are getting towards the end, but not quite yet. And don't forget, I know when I say time-wise, we might be getting towards the end, but as far as price is concerned, that's usually where the massive amount of moves happen. So, if you think the 42,000 to 123 was big, you could end up seeing a lot higher, crazier numbers than this, and it could happen faster than most people think, right? Could you get that $250,000 Bitcoin? Sure. The question is, how long would it stay there, though? Right? Because in the previous markets, for example, if you go back to 2017, a lot of people saying 20,000, really it was more of that monthly candle close around 13, right? We only got to 20,000 for what, like a day or two? And that was it. So that's just as much as an outlier to the top, as much as you would have the COVID crash to the bottom, right? Those are both very extreme wick examples. But if you take the overall chunks, the monthly closes, you look at that, very, very nice upwards trend, not showing anything out of the ordinary. So I guess the question that everybody's asking is, well, then what's going on? If everything's great, what's going on? Well, not necessarily, guys. You do have a weak U.S. labor market, right? The numbers that have come out according to CNBC, which, by the way, apparently, I don't follow a lot of politics and stuff, but I heard that the initial numbers were like way off and they were a lot worse than we thought. So I think that kind of freaked everybody out. Plus, of course, you have Donald Trump with the tariffs ranging between 10 to 41%. This is creating more uncertainty, and if there's anything that markets hate more than anything, it's uncertainty, right? If you can project bad news, if you can project good news, okay, we can factor that in. If we don't know the outcome, that's usually when things get a little weird, right? And so this resulted in a pullback in stocks and demand in bonds and growing expectations that crypto may not be immune, right? Again, although we've been talking about crypto and Bitcoin on this channel for a while, it's still a relatively new asset to most of the world, especially the people that have just gotten access to the ETFs recently, and really even beyond the ETFs, only barely just starting to see it offered to more of these traditional client bases, right? To us, what are you talking about? This isn't anything new. Well, to most people it is, and you would be surprised how many people are still not allocated. So according to Ray Youssef over at No One's App, he was pretty much just saying that the macro environment is no longer just background noise. Bitcoin is caught between ETF-driven optimism and uncertainty around global trade tensions. It remains the risk benchmark, but it may trade in a tighter range unless a new macro catalyst emerges, such as another unexpected rate move or geopolitical shift. But he does say, I expect August to be relatively muted in terms of price volatility, but deceptively active in terms of positioning. So there's two things you can take away with this. The first thing you could take away is that, as I showed you in the beginning, August tends to be the median sort of worst month for Bitcoin, but it's not actually necessarily the worst in terms of historical pullbacks, right? It's just kind of a generally kind of sluggish, low, maybe even potentially ending negative type of a month, right? We do have to see how that plays out. Obviously, Q3 is always the weird one. Q4 has tend to be a very euphoric period for Bitcoin, as well as a very detrimental time for Bitcoin. So we would again have to see how fast things start to take off, when they do, which I do believe they do. And I wanted to just play this clip from Jack Mallers because it made me think about what Ray Youssef was talking about, where they're starting to position, right? That's the second thing. So that is what smart money does. When they see that, people are freaked out, the price fell by 10, 15%, whatever, and then it's kind of just going sideways. That's what literally happened to us this spring, right? Remember when it was just so boring for months and months and months and Bitcoin just wasn't moving, nothing was happening, what's going on? And then boom, it just shot up out of nowhere. Same thing arguably just happened recently. We couldn't really break out of that $100,000 area, and then we had that massive moonshot to 123, right? And that's what these markets do. They tend to catch you off guard. And if you do, as I do, believe that we are still in a bull trend, then the smart money is positioning themselves. And not only that, but they realize that you hear a lot of talk about Bitcoin being a hedge against inflation, which I do believe that it is long term. Long term, Bitcoin is the best hedge against inflation. You can't deny that. The numbers are there. But short term, you are going to have these moments. But those who truly realize it have no problem taking advantage of the moments, buying the dips, and having that patience.
I do want to fixate again on the reason Bitcoin's selling off. I think it's an important idea by Parker Lewis. Bitcoin's not a hedge. It's a solution. I love that quote. Anyone that understands Bitcoin doesn't take 1% of their portfolio and use it as a hedge, right? Anyone who understands Bitcoin's like their entire portfolio, like me. I only own Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin's not a hedge. It's not supposed to perform well in the early innings of a financial crisis. Guys, what happens in a financial crisis is everything sells off. So, even before Bitcoin existed in the 08 financial crisis, gold sold off tremendously before rallying to new highs. And so Bitcoin's not a hedge. Don't evaluate it as an ability to hedge moments like this. It's a solution. It's a replacement.
So like I said, guys, not too many clips today. I wanted to just get right into the point of the video, which is to just kind of go over where we're at, what's going on with sort of TA. Should we be worried? So the one thing that we can point out is that we did have a massive, massive decline in the DXY, right? It was down pretty much 10%. Starting since the beginning of the year, but you have seen this legacy trend line, which goes back, believe it or not, all the way back to 2008. You could say that this was a little bit of a bear trap here, but ultimately, it has at some point always come down and touch this line. And what is it doing? It's touching that line again, right? So I do think that, based on this chart, depending on how things go, you've already seen it pull back. It may have a little bit of an issue breaking back above this 100. And if we do finally end up breaking down, then I think that's when you're going to see things like Bitcoin start to soar, which is also why when you're talking about why the altcoins aren't doing well at the moment or doing worse compared to Bitcoin, well, if we just look at the dominance, right, we have this upwards trend and we came down, we attempted to almost touch it. Maybe we did touch it if you switch it into a linear, chart right now. But my point is, we did have that bounce. And as you get the dominance moving back up, regardless of price falling down, it's going to be much worse for your altcoins, right? But here is the thing, and this is why we were actually expecting this. Now, I know you're probably saying we were expecting a pullback. Well, we didn't quite know when we were going to get it, but, and I know some people refer to this as a meme or some type of sorcery, but yeah, the CME futures gap, guys, this thing has, I believe, around a 94 to 96%, some crazy number, chance of closing. I think there's only been a handful, correct me, 3, maybe 4 gaps in all of the history that have never closed ever. So that is a lot of percentage that leans on the chance of closing, right? And you can see right here, we actually had this gap right here at around, this was gap to close would have been around 114,000. Now, obviously, as I'm making this video, these markets are not open. For all we know, the candle could start up here. It all depends on when you're watching the video. But for the most part, we thought that this gap might get closed. And to be honest, I'm kind of happier that we closed it sooner than later, right? Because I'd rather close the gap when we're only at 123 than when we're at 150, and then we have to come down, 30% or whatever that is. So obviously you can see right here, we can get rid of this now, right? Excuse me, guys. We can get rid of this right now, right? This gap has officially been closed, so there you go. Now we have to see where this candle opens on Monday. If it opens lower, well, again, that's probably not necessarily good in the short term, but it doesn't mean that Bitcoin is necessarily going into a full-on bear market, because the one thing that Bitcoin has never done before, which it did for the first time ever, we took this legacy trend line all the way back to December of 2017. You see it started right here. We never were able to have a candle close ever above it. It always acted as resistance. Even during this big move, when Bitcoin was in the 104 area, we still were not able to close above it. And if we actually zoom in, obviously these lines aren't perfect. They're very long lines that go over a very long period of time. But, this is down around that sort of $110,000, $111,000 area. So one of the most bullish things you would probably want to see is flipping this into support, or even possibly, we come down, we bounce around like this. And this looks like we're in a downtrend, right? Excuse my ugly squiggly lines or something like that, and then bounce back up, So we have to ultimately see how this plays out. But if we look at the broader picture, we forget the 4 hour, forget the daily, whatever. We just look at these larger bands, these weekly EMAs, for example. You could see that we're not even down here at the top of that area. So, according to the EMAs, you could have Bitcoin come all the way down to 105, still be higher than this area back here, and still be supported, right? So as far as that's concerned, we have everything in order. And I like to also look at these Fibonacci extensions, which goes to show you that our next target to the upside is about 103, but it does show us that we could come anywhere between 102 and 109, right? And still be in an uptrend. So, again, I kind of, there are areas where you could start to get that concern depending on how you're looking at this. But for the most part, if we just take a simple trend right here, try to connect those lines a little bit, maybe move it up if you want to do the fake out, whatever. That still gives you a whole area to come down to the 0.786, even down to as low as 102,000, and Bitcoin still remains on a bullish trajectory. So that, to me, in accordance with all of these moving averages being in the perfect order, as well as getting this green dot down here and having money flow. Look, you are having a little bit of sell pressure, right? RSI a little bit high here. So it's not saying that it's perfect, but it's also not saying that this is the end. We should be throwing in the towel. We should be freaking out or anything like that. And, again, this parabolic trend, yes, it's moving to the upside, but really it's just been in this sort of boring uptrend, right? So at the end of the day, I know this can sound a little bit repetitive, but I just wanted to let you know, sometimes we have these moves in Bitcoin, people freak out, they get worried. There's not really that much to worry about, in my opinion. If anything, these are the opportunities that we wait for, right? Could it go lower? Yeah, we could, like I said, we could go to the 102 area. That would break the structure. That would probably drag it out even longer. But the longer you build the base, generally speaking, the higher you'll end up going, right? If you just go up, just straight up as fast as you can, it's like the faster you go up, the harder you fall down, right? If you build those bases over long periods of time, you build that structure, you build that foundation, not only are those excellent opportunities for accumulating, right? Because people can only get so much money to invest so fast, but at the same time, you're also making the actual chart, the asset itself, stronger because you have more volume in that area, more people trading back and forth. And as price appreciates above that level, that's when you sort of have those, we're never going below that level again conversations, right? And one other thing I just wanted to end on really quick is I thought this was an interesting thing that Elon Musk asked. He said, he asked this to Grok, estimate the probability of quantum computing cracking SHA-256, which is, Bitcoin's encryption. And it says, based on 2025 assessments from NIST and IBM, expert surveys, the probability of quantum computing cracking SHA-256, blah, 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 I'm not going to get into the math, is near 0% in the next 5 years and less than 10% by 2035. So, quantum computing is something that I've heard a lot about, but the Bitcoin network is able to grow. It is able, if we had to at some point, I'm sure you could change that at some point. Obviously, there might have to be a fork involved. I'm not a genius. I don't know. Tell me all about that mathematical stuff. But at the end of the day, hey, look, we can look 5, 10, 20 years out. But for now, it's safe, according to Grok. So well, according to people. So I don't know. I just like to, that's a thought. I always hear people say, well, what if they can, crack the Bitcoin algorithm or whatever? It's like, well, they haven't done it yet. And it also, not to mention, would take immense energy. It would be a waste of time, I would think, to do something like that. So that is why I still prefer Bitcoin in the proof of work category, because, proof of stake to me, it's cool if you're staking and you're getting money from it, but it also puts hands in sort of the largest holders, right? Whereas it doesn't matter really if you mine more Bitcoin than someone else, unless you're able to get 51% hash rate on the network. It's all equal, right? There's no one individual. Not even Michael Saylor has control like that over Bitcoin. Just because he holds a lot doesn't mean that he has any control over the network, right? So basically on that note, guys, I'm going to leave that there. I am going to just remind you again, if you do want to check out Femex, guys, I do have a link for massive bonuses below. They are a no KYC exchange, super great liquidity, really easy to sign up. They've been around for multiple years. I mean, 6 years we've been mentioning them on the channel, and they've been nothing but a great exchange. Check them out. The only reason that I bring this up, obviously, is because some of the other exchanges, they are doing a lot of KYC now. It's tough sometimes when you want to trade. So, check that out. And again, friendly reminder with the meta signals. Like I said, I can't say too much, but I'm just an investor in the company, first of all. I know what's going on, but I don't make the decisions. I just know that they have really big plans. They're rolling out some other stuff. If you want to guarantee lifetime access, I would definitely check that out below. For the free signals, you can join the Discord. You can get free alerts. Check it out if you like what you see. Well, that's about that. And also, check out these tutorials popping up right here, right now. And if you guys want me to make more tutorials, an updated Femex tutorial, a Blowfin tutorial, let me know about that. And also, if you just want me to do more updates, TA and stuff like that, let me know. All right, guys? So until next time, stay crypto. And, of course, peace out.